Good evening and welcome to A Toast and Taste of Winter, brought to you by Greater Harleysville and North Penn Senior Services. We are thrilled that you are here and we are expecting to have a wonderful evening together. Let me say that we're especially appreciative this year, as we always are, but especially this year, of our sponsors. And I'd like to start by thanking them. I'd like to thank Harleysville Bank, Abington Jefferson Health, Eastern Diversified Services, Spring Hill Realty, Pay DC, Detweiler Hershey Associates, Volpe Enterprises, Mid-Penn Bank, and Home Instead. Thank you to those folks and to our advertisers. You can see more about them on our website or in the program book, and we ask you to please patronize them. They've supported us, and they're not supporting, as you know, the organization, but the services that we provide. And speaking about services, most of you probably know that we have been up and running throughout the last year and providing most recently over 20 virtual services, programs on the internet. I don't want to bore you with a full list, but there's some exciting things happening, from computer classes to English as a second language, pain management, support groups, Help Yourself to Healthy Living, and lots of other programs. So as you're participating tonight through your purchase of this evening's meal, and hopefully by taking advantage of the auction, you're supporting services to our seniors. One of our key services that you're also supporting that I do want to mention is our Grab and Go program. That's the lunch that is picked up each weekday at Encore Experiences in Harleysville, a very vital part of the nutritional balance and socialization for the people who participate. We'd like to give, again, a special shout out to our two sponsors, the Winery and the Brewery. You'll see a few of their products up here. Boyd's Cardinal Hollow Winery is helping us out, and you'll see lots of information and fascinating film at the winery. And also Free Will Brewing Company. You'll see some of their products here. They also are a sponsor and have helped us with our beer and ale and brewery needs. So, please remember, take advantage of the auction. You'll see how to access it across the bottom of your screen. You may also go to our website, and remember to watch for the raffle at the end of our program. There's some exciting prizes, and hopefully you'll be a winner. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm Chris, the winemaker from Cardinal Hollow Winery. I'm going to go through the food and wine pairing with you. So I'm going to just read out the description, and I'm going to talk about the wine a little bit so you know what you're looking for. But remember, everybody tastes something different. So what I may say, what you could look for, you might not pick that up because your taste buds may be completely different. So let's start with the beef entree. So doing a sliced beef tenderloin with a horseradish cream sauce. Oh, now I'm hungry. Roasted red skin potatoes and green beans, another one of my staples. I make that one at home all the time. All right, so doing the sliced tenderloin, again, you're gonna have probably medium rare in the middle, nice char on the outside. So that char is gonna work with your heavier reds. So I paired a Cabernet Sauvignon with it. Now again, it's a Pennsylvania cab, so it's not overly heavy, but you're gonna get more fruity flavors out of it. Some cherry, some dark raspberries, which will work well with the little sauce that's gonna be on there, especially that horseradish sauce. And I do my reds as a colder fermentation. So you're not gonna get a lot of that tannic structure that you would normally get from a reserve red from California that was sitting in oak barrels for years. So mine's gonna be more fruit forward, very refreshing, and that way when you're done with dinner, you can finish the rest of the bottle because it's not gonna interfere with your palate. Hi, Chris again. All right, we're moving on to the next one. Let's go with the fish entree, which is actually, we're preparing that for you guys and ladies. So it's a 4-ounce piece of smoked lemon pepper rainbow trout. And now here we go. The hickory smoked Arctic char. Now again, char, people go, what is a char? It is very, very similar to salmon. So it's gonna look like a salmon, but it's not. It's actually in the same family, but it is a different fish. Now we're gonna drizzle that with a little sauce, and that'll be over a bed of steamed rice and vegetables. So keeping it healthy for you, right? So on the lighter side, especially with the fishes, now these are smoked fishes though, so you're gonna have a little bit of meatiness to them, but fish generally pairs well with white wine. So I'm giving you 2 options. One, the Chardonnay. So if you're a dry white fan, here we go. Again, but it is a Pennsylvania Chardonnay. And then the option for that is if you want a little bit of sweetness, I'm going with Riesling. So again, the Chardonnay has just a kiss of oak. And I mean kiss, if I didn't tell you it was in there, you probably would not get it. So the Chardonnay is not going to be a heavy one like your normal California stuff. More lighter, again fruitier, because again I do colder fermentations with all my wines. But you're still going to get that nice Chardonnay flavor, and it'll pair great with those fishes. And then going with the Riesling, it just gives you that little extra sweetness, and you're going to get more apple and pear tones out of your normal Riesling that grows very well here in Pennsylvania, because the growing region here in northern PA is very similar to actually Germany. And that's where all your whites generally come from. The Riesling, the Traminette, the Gewürztraminer, those are all German style grapes. So enjoy. All right, Chris again here. Now let's go on to the Korean entree. And again, I'm going to read this one for you. And if I mess something up, I'm sorry. Bulgogi. And this one, Hapachi stir-fried noodles and vegetables. I'm sure I messed that one up. And then mandu is the dumplings. And then served with rice and a side. So that's probably a wild side of some kind. But again, neat Korean entree combination. Now, the thing with the Korean stuff, with their sauces and things that they use, what generally pairs well with the wines is a sweeter wine. Now, so I've gone and picked my, of course, famous whiskey mead, all honey fermented in old whiskey barrels. So you're gonna get that honey flavor, a little bit of whiskey aroma, but again, a little bit of sweetness, not a lot. It's only a semi-sweet, but absolutely delicious. If you have a little bit sweeter tooth, then go with the raspberry. Because again, that raspberry in the wine, again, it's over 1 whole pound of raspberries per bottle. No flavorings, no additives, no syrups, no grapes. Just raspberries. So you're gonna smell raspberry, you'll taste raspberry, and you'll get a nice sweet finish to it. So that's gonna pair well with the veggies and that little drizzle sauce they're gonna have on there. So take your time, enjoy these, and if you need more, just call me.
So our first entree is the sliced beef tenderloin with a horseradish cream sauce. To pair with your beef tenderloin, I have chosen Moon Servants, which is our newest Dunkel Lager is a traditional Bavarian beer. It's going to have a smooth malty backbone that's going to help soften out that horseradish cream sauce and really bring out the backbone of that beef. Our fish entree is a smoked lemon pepper rainbow trout and hickory smoked Arctic char. For this, I've chosen our newest Pilsner, which is Percy Pilsner, an Italian style Pilsner. This is going to pair really well with fish entree because an Italian Pilsner uses European hops, which are going to give you a lot more aromatics, which are going to help bring out some of those inherent flavors in the cooking. For the Korean bulgogi entree, I've chosen one of our house favorites, which is our Craggle IPA. Craggle's going to be assertively hop forward with a very nice malt backbone, very citrusy. It's going to get a lot of lemon out of that. It's going to help soften your palate a little bit from those bulgogi spices.
We hope you enjoyed tonight's delicious meals and the wine and beer pairings that accompanied them. Now we're going to learn more about Boyd's Cardinal Hollow Winery. Hello! We're here today with Chris Boyd from Boyd's Cardinal Hollow Winery. Chris and his organization have graciously stepped up to be our premier winery for our special event. So we're glad to be here, and we're going to be asking him a few questions here. Chris, thanks a lot. We're appreciative.
You're very welcome. All right.
Well, we need to start at the beginning and ask, how did you get into winemaking, and how long has it actually been a business for you?
Well, good question. I get asked a lot, and it started out as a hobby, and that's it. Just at the basement of my house. Started with 1 little gallon batches. The 1 little gallon batches turned into 5 gallon batches, and then I learned a long time ago, in the beginning, that I could take a year or 2 years to make a really good wine, say a nice reserve red or something like that, and it's 5 gallons. That's only 24 bottles.
Oh.
So you can take 2 years to make something good and then drink it all like that. And so my 5 gallon batches turned into 55 gallon batches, barrels, and therefore now I get 20 some cases of wine out of each barrel. And before you know it, I had over 3,000 gallons of wine in the basement of my house. And lo and behold, I figured, okay, time to make it legal before I get arrested. And that's how the winery started. Wow. So it is my second full-time job. So,
oh my goodness. Well, how did you come to name it Cardinal Hollow Winery?
As part of the whole process of getting the federal alcohol permit and so forth, I have to actually go down and get my plot plan for my house, which is where the winery started, in the basement. And lo and behold, I found out I live in Cardinal Hollow, lot number 9. And I was like, well, thinking of a name for the business, that's pretty neat. All you have to remember that if there's a red bird on the label, that's a pretty good recognition. You don't have to remember anything else that's on there. And so if I got into more mass distribution and onto shelves, it'd be very recognizable. And as long as I kept my name in there, so my last name, Boyd, is part of the name of the winery, I'm fully protected, patent-wise, trademark, whatever, so it worked out great.
It's a great trademark, and people recognize it.
Yep.
Well, most people, probably like myself, assume that the basis of wine is grapes. So I'd be curious as to where you get all your grapes and what time of year you start processing them to make all this wine.
Well, I'm actually a PA preferred winery, so that means over 90% of my fruit actually comes from Pennsylvania growers. Now, that being said, I am not growing grapes. I don't grow any fruit. I tried it a long time ago. That is a whole nother job that you have to live on the farm. And so I decided I just started working with some good growers in Pennsylvania. So I have 5 different orchards, 5 different vineyards, 2 different orchards that I work with and get the fruit from them each year. So I let the Amish grow the grapes. Mm-hmm. I just back my truck up, load them in, bring them back here, and then I process everything myself. So that's just the grape part, but then also the orchard part, as in like raspberries, blueberries, peaches, you know, those other fruits, honey from the Pennsylvania Beekeepers Association. So again, the other fruits can be made into wine, and actually very good wine, because now there's no flavorings, no additives, no syrups, no grapes, no junk. So that little bottle of raspberries, over £1 pound of raspberries per bottle.
Wow. Wow.
As natural as can be.
I'm sure that it's a very complex recipe and process. But for those of us who aren't generally familiar with how you make wine, could you give us an overview of the process of making wine?
Sure. Well, the simple little thing is that you start with sugar. So it's sugar in some form. So it's whether sugar that's in the grapes, sugar that's in the raspberries, sugar that's in the peaches, and sugar makes alcohol. So it makes alcohol by the little yeast. Little tiny yeast that actually live on the skins that are in the air floating around. And the little yeast, its whole purpose, just like baking bread, where you actually put the yeast in the dough and then you let it sit and then it rises a little bit. Then you warm it up, you put it in the oven. Well, what's happening is those little yeast that are in the dough are eating the sugar and the carbohydrates in the bread, burping out carbon dioxide. That's where all those holes come from in bread. That's why bread rises, because they're burping out CO2 while they're producing alcohol as a byproduct. It's actually their waste. So yes, the little yeast actually pee out alcohol. So when you're drinking, you're actually drinking yeast pee. Yes, it is.
Thank you for that image.
But it is delicious, and everybody loves it. So the same thing happens here, whether it's a grape or a fruit of some kind. You're just pitching those yeast into that sugar solution, and then they go to work. And that's why when you ever see a vat of wine that's fermenting, it's bubbling. And that's all the CO2, the carbon dioxide coming off. As those little yeast make that alcohol.
Great, great. About how many bottles of wine do you produce at the winery in a typical year?
Oh, well, if you have bottles or gallons, I'm making somewhere around 3,000 to 4,000 gallons of wine. That'll equate into roughly, let's say, 10 to 20,000 bottles.
20,000?
Yeah. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot of wine.
It is a lot of wine. We're constantly capping, labeling, filling, racking, doing something. In fact, I just hired an assistant winemaker in training, so we're continuing to expand, and we're keeping moving forward as much as possible.
Well, we talked about the grapes, and I call that the base, for lack of a better term, of a wine. Do you use any other not ingredients, but anything else as a base for your wines in addition to grapes?
Well, again, it depends on which wine it is. So like the raspberry wine, the base is raspberries. That's it. There's no grapes in there. So same thing with your mead, which is a honey wine. Honey's the base.
Honey is the base for that wine?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Awesome. I was totally unaware of that. So, again, I confess I enjoy a good glass of wine, but I'm not overly familiar with it. When I go to the state store, I look in the rosé section, and there are 27 rosés. I look in the Zinfandel, and there are 27 Zinfandels, and you get the idea of what I'm speaking about. What differentiates, besides the name of the person or the company that made it, what differentiates a rosé from a rosé, or a Zinfandel from a Zinfandel, or whatever?
Well, keep in mind, when you see a label, most of the times, like I say with my Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Sauvignon is actually the grape variety that makes that wine. Now, by the federal alcohol rules, there has to be at least 75% Cabernet Sauvignon grapes in here to be able to call it Cabernet Sauvignon. Now, so you can always blend it with some Merlot or some Petit Verdot or something, but as long as the majority is that's what's on the label. So your Zinfandel is a Zinfandel grape. Your Syrah is a Syrah grape, and so forth. But each winemaker can take that grape and then do a multitude of different things with it. I can make a dry red out of a Syrah. I can make a semi-sweet Syrah. I can make a sweet Syrah. Just by how I finish it, what yeast I used. Do I use oak? Do I not use oak? Do I use stainless? How long does it sit on the skins? How long? When do we press it? How hard do you press it? What temperature is it stored at? So every winemaker has their own way of, quote, designing a wine.
I see.
So what you give a ton of grapes to one winemaker and a ton of the same grapes to another winemaker, 3 years later those two wines are going to taste completely different. But that's because the winemaker did his thing, not just starting with the grapes. So
wow, that's
always neat.
I've always been curious about that.
Yeah.
So now we're down to a very important question I'm sure other people are curious about as well as myself. What is your personal favorite wine that you make?
I make is my whiskey mead, yes. So that's all honey fermented in old whiskey barrels. And it's fermented in there for over a year, aged for at least another year. So all my meads are at least 2 years old. Scored 89 points at the International Mead Competition with it in 2017. And again, it's just all honey base, but fermenting it in those whiskey barrels gives it that little bit of a whiskey aroma to it. So when you smell it, you'll taste smell a little whiskey, then you taste it, and you get the honey. When you swallow it, you get that char to caramelization from the barrel. Absolutely delicious. It's also 15 to 16% alcohol, so it packs a little bit of a punch, but pairs great with barbecue food. A brisket, rack of ribs, roasted chicken, leg of lamb. Think something that's going to be barbecued, and great pairing.
If someone wants to find out the actual address or the hours or learn more about your services, how can they contact you?
I'm all over the web. So if you just plug in Cardinal and Pennsylvania Winery, I am the whole first page that pops up. So there's multiple ways to find me, call me, email, text, whatever. Yes.
I'll be there.
All right. So we got some questions for you. Here's one. How many grapes does it take to make a standard bottle of wine? Anybody? Let's see. Well, it's about 200 grapes or 2.5 pounds of grapes per bottle. Here's another question for you. How long after planting is a grapevine ready to make wine? Well, grapevines take at least 3 years to produce. Now, some grapevines will produce in a year or two, but you can't use them. You got to cut the fruit off and wait, because you want that vine to really grow and expand and then be usable. So you're really talking about 3 to 5 years, and then those grapevines will produce easily, as long as you trim them well, upwards to 40, and some grapevines can even go upwards to 100 years old. How many bottles of, here we go, Pole Roger champagne did Winston Churchill drink in his lifetime? All right, here's a neat answer. About 42,000 bottles of wine, and that's by his own accounts. And that averages out to about 1.5 bottles a day for his entire adult life. And that's pretty much about what I drink as the winemaker. It's about 1.5 bottles a day. My wife keeps yelling at me. I'm trying to get it down to a bottle, but we'll go from there.
Many of us had the opportunity to enjoy delicious food this evening that was prepared for us. Now we have a special treat. We're going to learn from Chef Cindy and friends how to prepare some very special dishes using the spirits that we're talking about this evening.
So today we're going to do a very simple, very traditional cheese fondue. So you're going to need about 1.5 pounds of Gruyere and Emmental cheese, or any good Swiss. You can buy them and shred them yourself, or you can get them shredded. We are going to need some fresh lemon juice, a clove of garlic, some cornstarch, and some white wine. So the first thing you want to do is, when you get a garlic clove, make sure it's closed at the top. Once the paper skin starts to turn brown and separate, you can tell that the garlic is not as fresh. And if it has a green sprout, don't buy it. So you're going to break it apart so that you end up with a clove. And then what we do is smash it with the flat part of your knife. And then you can remove the rest of the paper skin. And then, to impart the flavor, you're just going to coat the inside of your enameled cast iron pan or your fondue pot. So we're just going to go around. You can actually smell it. And then you can discard this. Then we're going to squeeze our lemon juice. Make sure you don't get any seeds. And first, you can roll your lemon to make it so that it's softer, but this one's pretty juicy. So we have that. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna dump our cheese in first, sprinkle in our cornstarch. Don't put it all in one clump, and then drizzle your lemon juice over the top. And then we're going to pour in about a cup of white wine. A quick, good grind of pepper and nutmeg. And now we're going to take it to the heat. You don't want to have your heat on too high because you need to melt the cheese and not actually scald it or burn it around the edges. So it's a slow process. So we're going to just stand and allow this to melt down and have the flavors meld. So you're going to have champagne, fresh mushrooms, a little bit of olive oil for your pan, and some rosemary. You can also sprinkle in a little salt and pepper. So first, you're going to want to pop the stems out of the mushrooms. Take your rosemary. If you use fresh, pick it off the stem and then chop it a little bit. So you're going to heat a little bit of olive oil in a saute pan. Once the oil is hot, you're going to place your mushrooms in there. Once you've sprinkled the rosemary into the pan, get your champagne. Pour it over the top. Because you're pouring it into a hot pan, you are going to get some sizzle and some bubbling. Let it cook for about 5 minutes, reduce down, simmer. And then if you'd like to, you can garnish it with a sprig of fresh rosemary once you've plated it, or just eat them right out of the pan. So what you need is a half a cup of regular sugar, 4 cups of mixed berries. We're using strawberries, blackberries, and red raspberries. And then you need a cup of red wine.
I'm cutting the strawberries for our sauce, which is raspberries, blackberries, and strawberries, and wine. Okay, here we go. There we go. See how easy this is?
So you're going to want to put your berries in a saucepan, sprinkle the sugar over the top, and then pour your wine in.
And some we know. The more the better. There we go.
Put it on a medium-low temperature, flame or electric stove. You can scoop your ice cream and get that ready. And then ladle it gently over the top, and then you want to eat it right away. When cooking with wine, how much alcohol remains after a dish is cooked? Well, the longer you cook, the more the alcohol cooks out. But you have to cook food for about 3 hours to fully erase all traces of the alcohol. After an hour of cooking, 25% of the alcohol remains. And even after 2.5 hours, there's still 5% of it. Now, when you flambe and ignite it, you will burn alcohol off more quickly. So we use nutmeg today for our cheese fondue, but what is the most expensive spice in the world by weight? It's saffron. Saffron is so expensive that a pound of it can cost you $5,000. It is so expensive because it's a complicated spice to harvest. You'll be needing so many laborers to pick up the flowers and separate them. It actually comes off the stamen of the flower, and so most flowers only have a few stamen. So that's why it's very expensive. What percentage of mushroom is water? They are 92% water, almost the same water content as a cucumber. Also, when you purchase mushrooms, take them out of that blue container with the plastic wrap, and if you have a brown paper bag left over from purchasing a bottle of wine maybe, or a brown paper lunch bag, store your mushrooms in the refrigerator in the brown paper. It keeps them from sweating as much as they do because they have a high water content. It also absorbs the moisture.
Tonight is not only about wine. Now, let's learn about Free Will Brewing Company and craft beer. Hello. Here we are at Free Will Brewing Company, and we're glad that you're joining us. I'm here with our host, Joe Farrell, retail manager of this organization, and he's going to share some information with us. And maybe you could start by telling us about how long the founders have been in this business and how they got started in the business.
Absolutely. So Free will officially opened in 2012, right in the basement of this very building. Over time, and as some of the draconian laws regarding alcohol in Pennsylvania kind of changed, they started being able to serve pints, and they moved the business to the upper floors of the building, and over time we became a full-service production facility and taken over pretty much, the main floor of this building. The original tasting room actually still sits beneath us, and we actually still use that as a rental for private parties, events, beer dinners.
Wow.
In fact, the original seating down there is barber's chairs, and they're still down there actually right now.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
Wow, great. Well, I'm not a beer expert, but as long as I've heard about beer, I've heard about hops and malt, and I'm sure there are other ingredients too. Could you tell us what are hops and malt, and while you're explaining that, maybe tell us about the general process that you go through to create beer?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're talking malts and hops, malt refers to several things associated with maltose, right, or malt sugar. But in the case of beer, malt adds sugar for fermentation and generates most of the flavor. So hops are a plant. They're actually a distant relative in the cannabis family. They were historically used to preserve beer during shipping and transport to other countries and overseas. So if we want to talk about the brewing process itself, we are looking at the tanks and things right behind us, right? So the brewing process itself is something that takes from grain to glass over the course of several weeks, if not months. Okay, so we're going to go through a couple of steps. All right, so step one, you can't see it from right here. I'm not sure if you can see it on the camera, but in the back we have a mill room, right? So step one is going to be milling the grain. So different types of malts are going to be crushed together to break up grain kernels in order to produce or extract fermentable sugars and produce a milled product called a grist. Okay, and step two, we're going to do mash conversion. So we're going to take that grist, we're going to add the grist into hot water into a tank called a mash tun. It is mixed with heated water in a process called mash conversion, and this process uses the natural enzymes in the malt to break down the malt starch into sugars. So then we're going to take that mash and we're going to put it into the next vessel, which is called a lauter tun. So step three is lautering. The mash is pumped into the next vessel, where sweet liquid called wort is separated from the grains. Okay. Step four, it's going to go into the next vessel. It's going to go into a kettle. This is going to be the boiling process. The wort is pumped into a vessel where it's brought to a controlled boil before adding hops. So step five is going to be wort separation, right? So after the boil, after it's in the kettle, it's going to be transferred to a whirlpool, right? So in this vessel, the wort is whirlpooled, right, and it's going to all the leftover grains and the hops and stuff are going to be separated out of the wort itself. Then we're going to transfer that from the whirlpool into a fermentation vessel. Okay, so it gets cooled down, goes into a fermentation vessel where yeast is then introduced into the vessel. So the yeast itself, which is a microorganism, is going to eat the fermentable sugars in the beer and start producing alcohol, carbon dioxide, a couple different flavors, right? This is a process that can take a couple of days. So from the fermentation vessel, it's going to go, it's going to sit for a little while, right? It's going to mature. So in the maturation stage, new beer or fresh beer is called green beer, right? Young beer. So it needs to be matured to allow for basically a full development of flavor. Okay, and then we're going to take that from the fermentation vessel and we're going to transfer it into what's called a bright tank, where it's cooled down, it's matured further, it's going to be brought up to its full potential where it's going to be carbonated, and then from there it's going to go into the packaging stage where it goes into cans, bottles, kegs, whatever, and then straight to your glass.
It's a long process.
It is.
Very complex. And different temperatures.
Different temperatures, yeah. Over the course of the entire time it takes a lot of ups and downs.
Wow. Well, if I'm not disciplined enough to come to a wonderful place, like your brew company,
Sure.
and I go to the local beer store, My confusion is there are so many different kinds of light beer. There's so many different kinds of lager. There's so many kinds of ale.
Right.
And I don't understand, besides somebody tells me one's good or one they like, how can all those companies say I'm a lager or I'm a light or I'm an ale? They use the same name, but they're coming from different places. What makes them different, I guess, is my question.
It comes down to the recipe. So we talked about, I mean, the four ingredients that make beer is water, malted barley, yeast, and hops, right? So a different combination of all those different things is going to create those different beers. You know, we talked about ales and lagers, right? You know, it's the different yeast traditionally where you're going to start going off to those different categories. You know, when you start getting into IPAs and brown ales and things like that, a lot of different colors are coming from those malted grains at the very beginning. So you might have like chocolate malts or, you know, Pilsen malts, things that are different colors that are just going to give that beer a different color characteristic. You know, flavors are going to come from the yeast, they're going to come from the hops, they'll definitely come from the grains themselves. So your best bet is to talk to your local beer server, you know, your local retail manager, ask a couple of questions and we can get you into the right style.
Well, as we sit here, I look out here at these vats, and you've referred to a lot of other machinery that's here. It seems like a huge task mechanically to get these pieces in place and to maintain them. Could you give us a little insight about what it's like to be able to either organize this or keep it going?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know if you can see them in the back, but we have a couple brewers running around. Like, those are the guys that kind of run the show back here. So we don't make our own equipment here. I mean, obviously you buy all the own equipment, but you know, Free Will itself is a 15-barrel brewery, which means that we can brew 15 barrels at a time. A barrel of beer is what you would see as a half keg. Or, one barrel of beer is 2 half kegs, right?
Okay.
So say 30 of those kegs at a time we can brew. The different tanks behind are the fact that we brew, you know, such a huge amount of beer, we need to be able to go through those different stages that I talked about at the same time. So, you know, you have fermentation vessels, you have your bright tanks, you have the whole brew deck out here, which is going to have your, you know, your kettle, your mash tun, water tun, whirlpool, so on and so forth. But, you know, further in the back, if you can kind of see the tanks behind me, we're looking at 60-barrel tanks. There's a couple 30-barrel tanks. While we own a lot of this equipment, we also do a lot of contract brewing here, which means that we produce beer for other local breweries that don't have the same capacity that we do. So they'll reach out to us, qualified brewers, we produce beer for them, can it, and ship it out the door. Their recipe, they're involved in it, but we just go through the whole process for them. So yeah, all this stuff is maintained by a very elite crew of people. Couldn't do it without them, obviously. So.
You're obviously somewhat of an expert on this, and you're around an awful lot of different kinds of beers, it seems. What is hot? What is one of your favorites these days? Your go-to beer, I'd call it.
For me, it really depends on my mood.
Okay.
You know what I mean? If I'm looking for something, just a nice, easy, crushable beer after work, I'm drinking a Pilsner. You know, I want something that has crisp, clean flavors, something that kind of pairs well with, you know, an aftershift Uncrustable, which, you know, we have to have peanut butter and jelly here. You know, if I'm sitting at home and I'm having like a good night, I'm drinking a nice big barrel-aged Imperial Stout. If I'm going out to different bars and stuff, I'm always testing out their IPAs too. You know, I'm a big hophead myself, so I always want to test out the newest and greatest.
Now, I'm impressed by how many different kinds of beer and ale you make, and even more impressed now that I hear that some other organizations also take advantage of your equipment. But in a typical year, how many different kinds of product might you make?
Okay, so since the beginning, we now have 220 unique beers under our belt, right? If not more. I mean, there's stuff that's not out there too, you know. It really depends on the season, depends on the year. You know, even through the shutdown and things that we've had to endure, we've still been able to produce beer and distribute, do takeout for our customers and whatnot. We're generally producing 2 to 3 new beers a week.
A week?
But that's also returning styles as well. So we have, you know, a couple of core beers that are house favorites that we're brewing around the clock, which would be, you know, a couple of IPAs, which are Craggle, Techno, and Cloudy with a Chance of Charcuterie. We do Mango Wheat, Coffee Oatmeal Brown. These are beers that are brewed, you know, every few months. So we have fresh batches. They're house favorites. They just stay on tap all the time.
If people want to try your delicious beer, ale, various products, how can they get in touch with you to find out when you're open, what your hours are, what you have available?
Sure. You can find us at freewillbrewing.com. We have links to our online store through Shopify. We actually now distribute and do direct-to-home sales in all of Pennsylvania, and we just launched Washington, D.C., and all of Virginia as well. Which U.S. state has the most craft beer breweries per capita? That is, the most craft beer breweries per resident. Is it A, Pennsylvania, B, Colorado, C, California, or is it D, Vermont? Correct answer is D, Vermont. Number of breweries in Vermont right now, 68, and number of people per brewery is 9,176. As of October 2020, Pennsylvania is actually close to 32,000 people per brewery, with 401 in the state. Why do many beers lose flavor when served cold? Is it A, because cold temperatures dull your tongue? B, cold dissolves sugars in the beer? C, cold kills the yeast in the beer? Or is it D, cold makes the bubbles start to oxygenate? Correct answer is A, cold temperatures dull your tongue. The more complex flavor profile, the better it is to serve beer at room or cellar temperature. We always recommend to let a cold barrel-aged beer warm up a bit to really bring out the flavors. Senescillophobia is the fear of what? Is it A, filtered beer, B, a lazy brewer, C, an empty glass, or is it D, a macro domestic beer? Correct answer is A, it's an empty glass. So fill up your pints, cheers to you.
This is one last reminder from us to participate in the auction. There are great items out there and there's still time. The auction closes at 9 o'clock, so don't miss out. Next, the famous Cork Raffle. At this point, we have two exciting activities that remain. The first is to once again thank our sponsors for their support. We'd like to thank Harleysville Bank, Abington Jefferson Health, Spring Hill Realty, Pay DC, Altec Business Systems, Univest Financial Corporation, Detweiler Hershey and Associates PC, Dishel Bartle and Dooley PC, Eastern Diversified Services, Fox and Roach Realtors, Home Instead Senior Care, Mid-Penn Bank, Whistler Pearlstein LLP, and Volpe Enterprises. Again, we thank them for supporting vital services to seniors in our community. The first person that will be pulling a cork you probably recognize from an earlier portion of our program, Edie Miller, part of our cooking demonstration. Edie will be picking a cork for the $50 winner. Edie, please join me.
Oh, the winner is Theo Kodowitz. Congratulations, Theo.
Our next honorary cork puller will be Kathy Dillon. You'll recognize her from the segment you enjoyed tonight regarding cooking. The winner of Kathy's drawing will receive a basket from Free Will Brewing Company. Kathy, will you please join me?
Tracy Bly. Congratulations, Tracy.
Deb Huntsberger, site manager for Encore Experiences, will be pulling the next cork. The winner of this cork drawing will receive $100 in cash. Deb, will you please join me?
And the winner is Charlie Gardner. Congratulations, Charlie.
Next, Chef Cindy will be pulling a cork, and the winner of this drawing will receive a gift basket from Cardinal Hollow Winery. Cindy, will you please join me?
And we have Donna Buckley. Congratulations, Donna, you're a winner.
Our fifth and final prize is $200 in cash. It will be pulled by Donna Burns, site manager of the Peak Center. Donna, will you please join me?
I'm gonna look. And the winner is Jeff Junowitz. Congratulations, Jeff.
Thank you for joining us this evening. We hope you've had a great meal and learned some new things and had a fun time. We'd like to once again thank all of our sponsors and advertisers, but especially Boyd's Cardinal Hollow Winery and Free Will Brewing Company for their support of our program and for their support of services to seniors. Even as the auction closes, there continues to be an opportunity for you to support programs and services for seniors. If you'd like to do that, go to our website, just push the donate button and proceed from there. And so, cheers to you.